Hey, everybody, welcome to the Backpacking Light podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking to some brand new European long distance hikers and YouTube creators, the Bohohobos. We'll also talk relationships, the Tahoe Rim Trail, fast packing, steri pins, face masks, the new website we're building, and more. Stick around. It's going to be a very fun and packed episode.
Look for me in the mountains where walking has a way of pulling you to your peace of mind every day.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Marshall.
And I'm Ryan Jordan.
And in this episode of the Backpacking Light podcast, we'll be chatting with Aïscha, Tomasoa, and Jesper Jensen, otherwise known as the Bohohobos, about their recent long-distance trek through Scandinavia. We'll also chat about some gear, fill you in on some recent Backpacking Light articles and news, and give you some relationship advice. But first, let's catch up. So Ryan, what have you been up to?
My primary activity right now is project management for the new website we're building, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. How about you?
Well, I just got back from, I'm calling it a fast pack of the Tahoe Rim Trail, even though I didn't really have a light pack. But I did 36-mile days, 4 days in a row. And then on the last day, I did 20 miles, and I bailed with 14 miles left to go. So my goal for that day was 34 miles. I ran into some blister problems despite all my precautions. I do all the stuff you're supposed to do, but the heat and a very dusty trail with very, very fine powdery soil and high mileage just got to my feet.
The Sierras in the Tahoe area is very much like that. A dust is a killer there.
Yeah, and I don't know what to do about it other than maybe just take some time and rinse my feet off 3 or 4 times a day, but that kind of interfered with the mileage I was trying to make. So I don't have a plan for that.
I was watching you, I was tracking you on your InReach on your Garmin site, and you were always in a location farther along than where I thought you'd be. So good job.
Thanks.
And you said that you were doing long mileage days, which you certainly were, but you weren't necessarily carrying an ultralight pack. How much pack weight were you carrying?
I think my total dry weight was somewhere around 27 pounds.
Yeah, so 36-mile day with 27 pounds right out of the gate, that's pretty substantial.
Yeah, and there were a couple of days that the water carries I had to do, I think it probably easily got that weight up to 35, 36 pounds.
Yeah, that's a lot of stress on your feet.
Yeah, partly I did that on purpose because I was trying to test the load-bearing capabilities of a pack I'll talk about here in a second, but it did certainly make me, I did a lot of thinking about what your fast packing kit looks like, and I was kind of, it did make me think that maybe I need a dedicated fast packing kit if I'm going to do those types of miles.
Yeah, for sure. We can talk about what I'm doing in a little bit too.
So how about you? Do you have any cool trips coming up?
Well, August 11th, I am flying to Hartford, Connecticut to move Chase to graduate school out there. So we are trying to fit in one more hurrah in the Colorado Rawa Wilderness just south of Laramie. So we're going to head out there in the next week or so and see what we can come up with.
Nice. And how are you feeling about flying?
I'm not feeling super good, but I've done a ton of research about, just looking at the epidemiology of infection spread on planes, and it's pretty safe. So I think I would rather we consider driving, but it's 4,000 miles round trip. That's an enormous amount of time. I think it's possible to stay safe, but especially with a camper or camping. But we've got some stuff that we need to take with us that can't really be exposed to the elements of camping, like Chase's viola. He's a violist, and he has an instrument that has to be very carefully cared for in terms of climate. So flying's probably the best bet, and it will allow me to get into Hartford, in and out in a couple of days, and get back home and stay safe. So the one thing I am encouraged about is I am not going to a hotspot. So Hartford, Connecticut, and Connecticut in general is part of that Northeast zone where they've been very aggressive at dealing with COVID-19 outbreaks. And we've been having worse days in Wyoming, and it's been considered one of the better states. So I don't know. I think we're managing the risk as best we can, and then on the flight, we'll be a little more protected than what I would normally do if I were to go to the grocery store in Laramie.
Sure. Well, good luck, and it'll be interesting to see what that experience looks like for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I want to move into the gear section real quick, and I want to talk about a couple of things. The first is this Rogue Panda Zorro pack that I took on the Tahoe Rim Trail. Now, I was supposed to test this pack months ago, but COVID interfered with my testing plan. So this pack's been sitting in my gear closet for 6 months. I finally got the chance to take it out. And there's a couple of features that I'd like to highlight that I think are really interesting about this pack. Now, it's made out of X-Pack, which isn't in and of itself super unusual. But it does have a floating hip belt, which is something that I'm starting to see a little bit more of. So this hip belt is not structurally connected. It's not sewn into the pack in any way. It's just sort of loosely connected with a series of snaps, and it kind of flips up into place. I'll put some pictures in the show notes so you can see what I'm talking about. But it gives the ride kind of a light, floaty feel that's very different from a standard hip belt. The other thing that I thought was cool about this pack is it has these really interesting horizontal water bottle pockets that sit just below your elbows on the pack, and it's the easiest I've ever gotten a smart water bottle in and out of a pack. I think it's a super good design. And then the last thing that I really liked about this pack was it has very large hip belt pockets that you can open and close with one hand, which I thought was super useful.
That is really nice. I have almost pulled my shoulders out of socket trying to access both water bottles and hip belt pockets because it required two hands to kind of finagle it all out. So those two features alone seem incredibly valuable to me. And it's one that most packs I've tried that claim they have accessible pockets aren't really accessible.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that this is a first pack from a company that's actually known for making frame packs for bike packing. So really interesting. I mean, for a first go at a pack, I think it's really excellent, and I'd be interested to see what further iterations of this pack look like. The next thing that I took was the Barricade Bear Canister. This might be one of the most expensive pieces of gear that I've ever invested in. I sold a couple of paintings unexpectedly, and I decided to get myself one. And it's kind of like if you've ever spent time driving a really old beat up car, and then suddenly you manage to luck into a really nice car that everyone comments on. It's kind of like that. I had more people talk about my bear canister on this trip than I have ever had anyone comment on any piece of gear before. Super interesting.
It's all that beautiful spun carbon fiber. It's an absolutely gorgeous piece of equipment.
It really is. It really is. And then the last thing was I just wanted to give our listeners an update on the Tarp Tent Pro Trail. I mentioned this was my new favorite thing in the last podcast. So on this trip, I really got the chance to put it through its paces. And especially for the kind of trip I was doing where I was blowing into camp right at dusk and blasting out of camp as soon as I could in the morning, man, this shelter is awesome because it is so easy to set up and take down. It pitches out with 4 stakes. And I mean, I think it took me I timed it one time at 1.5 minutes, which I think is pretty astounding for a trekking pole supported shelter.
There is a lot of benefit to having a shelter that is super easy to pitch. And I don't think people appreciate this until they get into conditions where it's all of a sudden requires a lot of mental energy to pitch your shelter, whether you're super fatigued or it's windy or rainy and you just need a fast setup. Now you've got the Pro Trail Lithium, right?
That's correct. And that did come into play a little bit because, this is an interesting design. There's a lot of fabric in this design, and the panels are pretty large. So you have to get this pitch just right to keep it from being kind of loose and flappy, which is a little more difficult with Dyneema. So it does take a little bit of precision and If you're pitching on rocky soil and you kind of have to change the angles a little bit to get the tent stakes in, that can affect the pitch of this shelter a little.
So once you got the tent set up initially, what sort of minor adjustments did you have to make to get the pitch really good?
Um, Mostly just getting the angles precise. You can do the standard tightening with the integrated line tighteners that Tarp tent includes on this shelter. But mostly it's just you really have to get those nice right angles on your corners exactly right. So that's
Right.
mostly what I would fiddle with. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, I am working on further refining my fast packing kit, and I hope our trip to the Rewas will be a good proof of concept for it. We have just a short amount of time to squeeze in before we take off for the east, and so we're going to try to cover as much off-trail terrain as possible, tons of elevation gain, probably several thousand feet every day. And we have kind of one objective in this trip, and that is to find the biggest trout in the area. We have some leads. They are located in lakes that are almost never visited by hikers. And so we'll see what happens. But my goal with my kit is just, I'm going to eliminate the number of items. I'm going to minimize the number of items I carry because I just don't want to deal with stuff. So I think we're going to have pretty fair weather. So my shelter is going to be super simple. I'm tempted right now based on the weather forecast to just bring a bivy sack and call it good. And, cut a lot of the extra little bits out of my kit and keep it simple.
So you're doing a bivy sack on top of, are you using the Thermarest Uberlight and then like a ground sheet underneath that?
So I'm tempted. The Uberlight is the middle of the road mattress that I have. It's about 8 ounces. And then I have my luxury mattress, which is the Nemo Tensor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have my lightweight mattress, which is a Z Light, right? So I'm actually tempted to go with the Z Light on this because I don't want to risk puncturing the Uberlight, and there's starting to become more and more reports of this particular pad being punctured in rocky areas, and we're going to be in an incredibly rocky area. So it's only 2 nights. I might go with a foam pad. We'll see.
And what's an item that you would normally have on, let's say, a normal ultralight trip that you're leaving out of your fast packing kit?
A full tent. So normally I would probably bring something like a Tarp tent, Notch Lithium, or Locust Gear Khufu. Those are the 2 shelters I gravitate to most of the time. So foregoing a full shelter would be the main thing. And then going with a simpler cook kit. So, because we're fishing, we're catching trout, on a longer trip with less miles, I might be tempted to bring a fry pan for cooking fish and stuff like that. But I don't think I'm going to count on eating fish on this trip. I think I'm just going to carry my calories with me and just take a really simple cook kit based on maybe my cold soak pot, the Vargo titanium bot, and then just a simple upright gas stove.
Cool. Well, we will wait with bated breath to see how your fast pack kit shakes out. You'll have to give us a report when you get back.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, I want to move into the skills segment. And for this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the challenges and rewards of maintaining relationships while being a backpacker. And by this, I mean a pretty wide range of things. We could talk about how to navigate relationships while hiking together. We can talk about how to maintain solid relationships while one partner is back home and the other is hiking. There's a lot to unpack here. And this came up in my head because I recently published an article at BPL where I thought about this stuff. But Ryan, I'd be interested in hearing your take on all this first.
There is a book that absolutely rocked my world, and it's called Where the Mountain Casts Its Shadow. And it talks about the impacts that the significant others left at home have when their spouses or significant others are out climbing in the mountains and performing these high risk activities. And that gave me some insight into the psychology of what it does when 2 partners are separate and doing very, very different things with their lives. So that's kind of the framework I came from. is just being able to acknowledge that whoever it is you're leaving back home, they're dealing with the usual crises that we face every day, like, home finances, property maintenance, dealing with relationship issues with friends and family. And, like when Stephanie and I are together at home, we can share those burdens. But when I go hiking, the burden transfers almost exclusively to her. And I can't pretend that that's an insignificant burden. And that's what I really try to get people to be aware of is um, there's a transfer of energy here that's very real. And it's really important to acknowledge that and communicate about it when you go on these trips.
Yeah, and one of the things that I focused on in my article was then what's the next step beyond that? Like, once you acknowledge that, what do you actually do about it? How do you actually navigate these waters once you say, okay, I know that my lifestyle is interacting with our family's life, in sometimes a negative way.
Yeah, I mean, being able to communicate, well, acknowledgement is the first step, right? So then you actually have to communicate about it and find out what each partner needs. And especially the partner back home, what do they need to feel safe, secure, that they have all the tools that they need to deal with the stuff that comes up. And so it could be simple logistical issues. So, for example, if I'm the one who's managing the bills, thank goodness I'm not, but if I'm the one that's managing the bills and I'm the one taking off, and then there's an issue with a bill or a vendor, then Stephanie needs the ability and access to be able to deal with that on the fly. And so there's practical logistics, and then there's psychological logistics. Like we're a one car family, and so if I take the truck and drive 4 hours to a trailhead and leave her without a car, that may give a feeling of being psychologically stranded, if not practically stranded. So sometimes we'll rent a car and make sure she has some wheels so she can do the things she needs to do to keep her life moving as well.
Yeah, I talked to a family therapist and a PhD for this article, and one of the things that she suggested that I thought was very actionable was this concept of that everyone has an emotional bank account,
Mm-hmm.
and the withdrawals and the deposits into that emotional bank account, and just the recognition that even if you do everything right and you um, are doing your best to meet the needs of the person who is staying at home, it's still a withdrawal from that person's bank account. And it probably takes a little bit of extra intentionality on either end of your trip to make sure that this person is has enough deposits into their bank account.
That is absolutely true. And I know, especially when I've gone on long trips, I cannot come home and then expect to like hit the ground running with normal routines. There has to be some decompression to, not only restore and recharge energy from being apart, because I'm expending energy on a hard trek sometimes, so I'm going to come home tired. She's expending energy because she might be managing everything, so she's there's a deficit in her account. And so it's really important for us to come together and maybe even decompress somewhere else. Maybe we get an Airbnb for a couple of days and unwind together so that we can kind of recharge and rest and then return back to normal routines.
Yeah, that's really crucial. I think that even applies even if you're not talking about it within the context of a relationship. It's almost that concept of like, sometimes when you've been like on vacation, like maybe even at the beach for a week, but then you come home, it's good to plan yourself a couple of days on either end of your vacation just to reacclimatize to your normal life and get ready to go back to work.
Yep,
Um,
that's absolutely true.
Well, let's move on to the next segment, which is what's new at BPL, which today there's a lot new at BPL. So give us a skinny.
Well, last week we announced big plans for 2021 with the building of our new website, a really big web project for us. And that's probably where my mind is mostly right now, is just kicking that off and keeping it moving.
So if you've been around BPL for a while, you know that the website has gone through a couple of different iterations. Can you just kind of walk us through what the history of the site is and what led to this recent effort?
Yeah, in 2007, we custom built a website and set up an enterprise server. And it ran really, really well until about 2015 when our hosting company said that they were ceasing operations and we only had a few months to build a site. So the site that exists now is a child of that site that was rebuilt in 2015 on a very short budget and a very short timeline. And so we've been kind of saving money since then to enter a new development effort where we can, rebuild everything from the ground up and actually build the site we wanted to build back in 2015. So that's kind of where we're at today. And the last couple of years, we've really been focusing on server security, stability, and site speed. And now we're ready to finish up that phase and look at the entire user experience. And that's the exciting part for me because that's the part where our members get to reap the benefits of what we're doing. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So what's the timeline for all this, especially moving forward?
Well, right now we are starting on the user interface design, and then we'll proceed into all the things that go with design, like wireframing and user interface testing and mapping user flows and things like that. And then we'll start development late this fall, and then probably launch the new site, do a soft launch in March or so, and then a hard launch in May. And then next week we actually have a brand new site search engine. This is another piece we've been working on for the last few months because this is the number one issue that people have with our site. We have 1 million forum posts, we have thousands of articles, and it's really difficult to find stuff. And so we wanted to start with a user discovery experience so that they could easily find the content they wanted to look for. And so the search engine will probably integrate that with our site next week and do the final testing on that. So I'm hoping by the time this podcast drops, the search engine will either already be on the site or just a few days after the podcast. So we'll see.
Nice. And where can we learn some more about all this?
Yeah, the development timeline is all at backpackinglight.com/web 2021.
Awesome. And just one last thing, we've mentioned a few times how successful the Garmin InReach Masterclass was. What's the next masterclass that you and BPL are working on?
Yeah, so when someone takes one of our courses, they get an automated email series, and one of the later emails in that series is, "Hey, what else do you want us to do? What would be helpful to you?" And so the next topic, which has been overwhelming in terms of what people want, is information about how to plan a route and how to navigate. And so that's going to be the focus of our next masterclass will be route planning and navigation. So we're tying all that up right now. So I'm hoping to release it maybe towards the end of August or so.
Awesome. That's right around the corner.
Yeah, I've been putting the course together for the last few months. So we're almost done on that. So let's transition and talk a little bit about some hot topics that are going on in the forums right now. The first one is related to an article that I wrote and published in late July about lightweight wood saws for backpacking. And the response in the forums was really interesting to me because it highlighted some new parts that were not revealed in my research about what goes into wood saw performance. And then it allowed me to kind of discover some new products, especially like I learned about Japanese pruning saws, which I'd never even heard of before. So that was really cool. And now I've kind of dove into this rabbit hole on the internet about Japanese pruning saws and how they're designed and how they might be a really cool option for ultralight backpacking.
It's kind of like a great example of, I think what's so cool about the forums at BPL is like this community problem solving. It's super cool to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other forum I wanted to highlight starts with the question, are tech toys spoiling the wilderness experience? We've been talking about this topic for decades, since the GPS came out, right? And so the moment any of us took a GPS or a big, huge satellite phone out on a trek, it was like rife with controversy. You know, it's like guns, religion, and politics. And so to see this topic come up today, where tech is so pervasive and so prevalent in our wilderness experience, it's a different conversation today, and it's really interesting to me. So I love to see how these conversations evolve over the years. And there's something like 100 forum posts in this thread, and so many different perspectives, and it's really neat. But one thing I really do like about it, and it inspired me to like go back to my manual compass collection and bring them out and use them for a little bit. In fact, I'm working on a webinar right now that is like old school map and compass navigation. So just being able to like hold something in your hand that's non-electronic and put it to a piece of paper and figure out how to go somewhere is still a really tactile, rewarding experience for me.
You know, this forum thread was really interesting to me. When I saw you add it to the script and I scrolled through it, I was intrigued because my favorite thing this episode is actually a piece of tech. I wouldn't call it a toy, but it's the SteriPen, which I've just now finally gotten around to using. And, you know, I've been on this quest to find water treatment that I actually like for a long time. When I'm using a filter, I wish I was using chemicals. When I'm using chemicals, I wish I was using a filter. I just cannot seem to get it right. And this is about as close to perfect as I think I'm going to get. It's rechargeable. It's simple. It's fast. It kills viruses in addition to all the other stuff that a normal hollow fiber filter will get out. And it doesn't give you a chemical taste. So it's not as fast as filtering with something like the Be Free or the Sawyer, but it is faster than chemical treatment. And I have found it to be the easiest and simplest out of everything I've ever tried.
I'm a huge fan of the SteriPen. My favorite part of it is that because it's an ultraviolet technology, it actually has the ability to neutralize the stuff that's really difficult to kill with chemical treatment, and that is protozoa like Giardia and Cryptosporidia. So the SteriPen is the only technology that can really deactivate cysts and those organisms in a matter of 60 seconds. There's no other technology that even touches that. So to me, that's one of the coolest things about it.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of that in particular because I don't know that my marriage will withstand me getting Giardia for a second time. It probably would do it. So how about you? What's your new favorite thing?
Well, you know, we're all in this big pandemic, and we're kind of returning now to a sense where everybody is gravitating to being more careful. Thank goodness. It feels a little bit late to me, but I'm glad we're going that direction. And so the activity of wearing a face mask is becoming more and more prevalent everywhere. And I've never been one to just blindly follow political guidelines or recommendations. So I come from a science background. I have to look at the science. And so the face mask, the body of face mask science is really interesting to me because there's so much variability in the effectiveness of a face mask. So if you look at the difference between a bandana and a cloth mask that's based on a pattern from Joanne Fabrics versus something that might be more sophisticated, is really interesting because there's actually a lot of engineering that goes into creating an effective face mask. And so I've tested lots of different masks, not only just for personal comfort, but thinking about how the engineering of those designs could impact the spread of COVID. And there's one company in our industry that is making a mask now that I think is absolutely terrific, and that's Outdoor Research. They make a mask kit. It's called the Essential Face Mask Kit. And the key features I really like about this are that it provides a lot of coverage. So there's a lot of overlap with your chin, with the backs of your cheeks, and it travels up high on the bridge of your nose so that if you're breathing out or coughing or sneezing, a lot of the aerosol will be pushed backwards instead of forwards. The other thing I really like is the fit is highly adjustable. There's a really nice nose bridge wire in the mask, and It's a little bit stretchy, and the earpieces are adjustable, so you can really tailor it to a wide variety of face shapes. But my favorite feature is that it's built so that you can put a filter insert into it, which is also made by Outdoor Research. And this filter insert changes the efficacy of the mask from, a normal cloth mask performance to something much better. And so a normal cloth mask is going to reduce virus particle transmission anywhere from 10% to 60%, depending on the design. You add this filter into the OR mask, and now you've got a 95% effectiveness. And this is based on their testing with ASTM standards. And so it's a really interesting mask system that they've launched, and this is a good one.
Is this the mask that you and Chase are going to be wearing when you fly to Connecticut?
It's the mask I'm going to be wearing when I'm in an area where there's a risk of community spread. When I actually get on the plane, though, I'm going to wear an N95 mask.
Ah, got it. Okay. All right, let's transition from here into this episode's interview. You chatted with the Bohohobos, which is an awesome name, but really hard to say on a podcast. And you talked to them about being brand new hikers, being content creators while hiking, sort of living permanently on the trail. I think it's a really interesting conversation. So let's just go ahead and toss right to it.
Okay, I am here with Aïscha, Tomasoa, and Jesper, Jensen, and we are going to talk about their hiking lifestyle. Aïscha, Jesper, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks very much.
So I want to ask you guys a little bit of your backstory. Tell our audience who you are and how you got to this point where you're living this kind of bohemian lifestyle.
Okay, so I am originally from the Maluku Islands, but I was born and raised in the Netherlands. And
I am from Denmark.
And we both were working in a hostel in Italy where we met. And kind of stuck together for about 4 years now, and kind of maintained a traveling lifestyle.
Since, how long is it?
2016.
2016, we've been traveling almost nonstop.
Okay, great. So you, in last year, 2019, you embarked on this incredible through hike of Scandinavia. How did you come up with that idea as your first major trek?
Well, we had a lot of dreams about being outdoors and in nature and going to New Zealand and South America. But then we both realized that we hadn't really explored the areas where we came from, and that we should see a little bit more of Europe before heading to other different continents. And then we started to spar a little about how we would explore Scandinavia. And kind of jokingly, we came to the conclusion to just walk it, while we never really did a long distance hike before. And yeah, the joke kind of became reality, obviously.
This is a 3,000 kilometer trek, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's quite a joke. So tell me where you started, where you finished, and how long it took you to complete this trek.
We started in North Cape, on North Cape, like the top of Norway, the northernmost point of Norway. We started in the beginning of June 2019, headed towards a small town in Denmark called Fensmark, where I was born. And it took us, we arrived in Fensmark on the 12th of December 2019. So it took us
a little over 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months, okay. So it's on the scale of kind of a through hike that we would take here in the United States of one of our long distance trails for sure. Now, in terms of logistics, you know, a through hike here, you're typically hiking for 3, 4, 5 days. You get to a trail town, or you get to a road that you can hitchhike into a trail town and resupply, and then you get back on the trail and, you know, rinse and repeat until you're done with your hike. Is it similar in Scandinavia? Is it the same kind of time spent in the wilderness between resupplies, and what are the resupply logistics like?
When you start in the very north of Norway, you have 2 sections, which is 10 days without any roads or any villages or anything. So you need to carry everything you need for 10 days, and you have to do that twice. And then after that, it gets more. There's more civilization, and I think from there on, it's about the same as in the States.
Yeah, about 4 days after that. Yeah.
3, 4, 5 days.
And what's your routine when you're in a town? I mean, are you in towns, or are you mailing your resupply boxes to like post offices and stuff?
We just buy stuff in town, and usually when we walk into town, we well, at least I need to eat first before I go resupply. Otherwise, I just buy too much. So we head into a supermarket or a gas station and grab something to eat first.
Right,
and then we
right.
go through everything we need and slowly figure out what the store has, because they don't have everything in the north.
Right.
So you really have to improvise.
Did you mail or ship any resupplies to any post offices along the way, or did you rely solely on what you found in towns?
We did it once, where we just bought something in the town and then sent it to like 200 kilometers further, I think, because we knew that there weren't, we couldn't buy that much.
We are also
in the next town.
we are very inconsistent walkers and very unexperienced. So I don't think we had the experience to for the overview to start sending ourselves packages. So we just
Sure.
we focused on where is the next supermarket.
Yeah,
And
because
then
we couldn't
bought
really
food
tell
for-
beforehand how we would cope, I guess.
Yeah, sure. How much backpacking did you guys do before you embarked on this through hike?
Only overnight stays and a
Yeah.
maximum of 30-kilometer day hikes.
And then you jumped right into a 3,000 kilometer hike. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we didn't do any training or a test run, and nothing like that.
No, we went
Right.
about it really stupid actually.
Yeah, quite stupid.
Stupid, or there's some courage involved in that, because you tend to have faith that you can figure it out along the way, and you guys obviously did. So there's a lot of I have a lot of admiration for that as well. Do you what were your biggest challenges, given your lack of experience embarking on this? What were the biggest challenges you faced early on in the trip?
I think it was in the beginning we were just very enthusiastic and just forgot to take breaks and forgot to eat, and that kind of got us into some trouble sometimes.
Yeah, we really had to get to know ourselves. When do we stop and when do we keep going? It took a couple of weeks before we got into the right rhythm and not overwork ourselves.
So just energy management, food management, and getting the rest you needed so that you could sustain walking for long periods of time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And how did you see that evolve through your trek? So how many kilometers were you hiking in the beginning versus more towards the end?
I think we walked more in the beginning, and then we realized that it was too much.
Okay.
We had to slow down, so we walked in kilometers. I can use kilometers. I think we walked 25 to 30 kilometers a day, and then we went down to walk maybe only 20, 24, depending on the landscape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
terrain.
The terrain,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And-
we started too high, and then we went lower.
Right, right. Did you plan your itinerary before the trip, or did you just start walking and you'll finish when you finish?
We planned the first 400 kilometers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 400, and then we decided like, how do you say it? The next
Bit more plan as we go.
couple of hundred
Yeah.
kilometers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
about 10 days ahead.
We were following this long distance trail in Europe. It's called E1, and it
Yes.
goes from North Cape to Sicily. And we started following that at first, and then we kind of deviated as we went further down, and we kind of did what we saw there was something nice in a different direction. We went that direction, but there is only one trail to follow the first 400 kilometers, so we had to. It's not
And
much
then
choice.
after that, did you follow trails or did you kind of go off trail at all?
We mostly followed trails, and then we had to walk backcountry paths and roads to connect them.
Yeah, right. What was the terrain like up in the Arctic? So I've hiked up in the Arctic of Alaska, and there's a lot of tundra and tussocks and bushwhacking once you get south of the tree line. But is it similar up there? Is it wide open spaces? What's the terrain like where you were hiking?
Yeah, very wide open spaces. I guess it's kind of similar. We didn't do a lot of bushwhacking. Maybe more in mid-Sweden, there were a lot of swamps. But far in the north, when we were walking through the tundra, there could suddenly be a canyon that was like completely green and very lush, full of a lot of plants and trees, and where the river went through. But then you walk into Finland, and it's super rocky, full of boulders, completely different again.
Which probably slowed you down a bit, huh?
Yeah.
What are the river crossings like? I know that area of the world is bisected in a number of places by some quite large rivers, and you guys started during the season of snowmelt. So what was it like trying to navigate some of these rivers?
Some of them was not possible. So it was possible, but you had to go
Walk upstream.
walk up river for some kilometers before it was possible to raid.
And then still you would be in until your hips.
Yeah.
But it was the first one was probably the worst, and
and we never raided a river before.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was also very, very stupid.
That's awesome. That's one of the things that I think gives all backpackers, regardless of their experience level, some trepidation is trying to cross rivers. I know here in the United States, every spring, June, July, during the snowmelt seasons, that's our number one injury is hikers trying to wade a river that is just too rough for them, and they get themselves into trouble.
Yeah.
So I was curious. We crossed a number of large rivers in Alaska as well, and sometimes you had to swim them. And I was wondering if you guys had to deal with any rivers that were that big over there.
No,
No,
luckily it wasn't that bad.
no swimming. Thank God.
So tell me a little bit about like what's the wildlife like up there? I know in Alaska we have grizzly bears, we have muskox, and we have caribou, which you might know them as reindeer. What's it like in the Arctic over in Scandinavia?
A lot of reindeer. Yeah.
But
We
not,
just see thousands of reindeer.
but not wild reindeer.
No, they are all owned by the Sami people, the indigenous people of Scandinavia.
Okay. Did you meet Sami people when you were on your trek?
Yes, yeah. And before we started, we worked up in northern Finland, where we actually worked for a Sami-owned company.
Yeah. Also, in the very beginning of our walk, when the snow was still melting, we were sitting hunkered down in a little cabin, hiding from the weather, and a guy came up on a snowmobile. We were like, well, why is he coming on a snowmobile? We haven't had any snow. And then we talked with him, and he told us that apparently in the next valley that we were going to was still the snow was ankle deep.
I think it was knee deep.
Knee deep.
Yeah.
So we had but he told us some good things, and he worked in.
He was herding his reindeer
Okay.
at that time.
He spent his whole life in these valleys and these hills. So he had some good advice, and it really helped us on our travel or walk.
But also we've seen some moose.
Oh yeah.
And what else?
Lemmings, moose. Yeah, the bears.
There are bears, but we haven't seen any. Yeah.
Not that many, and they don't think when they see people. They don't think about food, so they're more scared of people than in the States, I think.
And there's also wolves, but you don't notice anything.
Right.
You have to be very lucky to see them.
Yes, bears and wolves tend to be quite shy in remote environments like that. So tell me a little bit about your equipment. How much gear were you packing, like in terms of pack weight, on your longest stretches?
I think when we had to carry food for 10 days, it must have been 18 kilo.
18, just over 20 maybe at the most.
Yeah, for you probably.
Yeah, we never really weighed our backpacks.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't really want to know in the beginning.
I imagine.
But we've learned from that.
Yeah, I imagine you're paying more attention to gear weight now, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I imagine that carrying that much gear is in part informed by the weather. You started during a season that wasn't exactly, the warmth of summer. So you must have had a bit of rain and some cold temperatures when you started, right?
Yeah, actually a week after we started, we had to stop for a couple of days because there was a huge snowstorm. But I think the coldest we had was maybe -7, -6 Celsius. Yeah, degrees Celsius.
Okay. And you took, you shared a tent. What type of tent did you take?
We had a Van Gogh blade. It's a Scottish brand.
Okay.
And it was, I think, about 2.2 kilo.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. This is the one that has the single arch pole, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have a similar design here in the United States made by Tarp Tent called the Double Rainbow.
Okay.
Very good. And tell me, what gear were you really, really thankful that you had on your trip?
I think sleeping bags. I think we had a really good sleeping bag.
Did you have down bags?
No, synthetic.
Yeah.
No face, I think.
Okay. And did your sleeping bags get wet at all?
I think only once. No, I think for me it was my hiking boots.
Yes.
I walked in the same pair all the way, and I didn't have any blisters, and they were just perfect, warm
Great.
enough.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I imagine you spent quite a bit of time with wet feet.
Yes.
Every day for 6
day.
months. You
How
get used to
about-
it. It's not walking with wet feet is okay, but putting on wet socks in the morning
Yeah.
Yes,
in
that's
2-degree weather.
right. How about gear that did not work? What failed you and how would you change it in the future?
I had a rain poncho with me that didn't fit over my bag. That was very stupid. So, but I think after the first 2 weeks, you also sent back a lot of stuff that was not necessary. I think you had a book that was like a 500-page book.
Yeah, but I just wanted to finish the book.
A rain poncho that didn't work at all. What else?
Like a water bag. Like, why even bring that when there's streams everywhere?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's just inexperience.
Sure. How much weight did you send home that first stretch?
3-4 kilo, I think.
Yeah, that's good. That's very common among thru hikers here in the States as well. There's a very well-known spot along the Appalachian Trail after the first several days where the hikers reach a store, and it's an outfitter, so there's lots of gear there and lightweight gear, and so they tend to send home everything they haven't been using there and then re-outfit with lighter gear. And it's definitely part of the thru hiking culture, and I'm glad to see that you guys shed some weight and sent some home at the beginning of your hike.
Yeah. I knew it from day one, actually. I already regretted it.
Yeah. Once you take those first steps, right?
Yeah.
Tell me what was their most memorable moment on that trek?
So many, I guess.
So many.
There are, I'm sure.
I don't know. I think it's not a particular moment, but the 10-day stretch without meeting anybody or seeing any civilization at all, that was a very, very special thing to try.
It is special. It's really difficult in today's world to be in a wild place away from people and society and everything that the first world civilization has to offer. And sometimes, even if you're not walking and you're just in that environment and detached from everything for several days, it's a mind-blowing experience for most people. So it's neat that you recognize that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's kind of addictive as well.
Yeah, but it was very nice that we had two of them right after each other. So it was 10 days, and then we supply, and then another 10 days, and then the second 10-day stretch you could enjoy even more because you knew you had what it takes to do those 10-day stretches.
Right.
Yeah, you can enjoy it even more.
Yeah. That's really, and also the landscape just got more and more. It's a bit flat at the very north of Norway, and then when you get closer to where Sweden, Finland, and Norway meet, the mountains get even more impressive. And I could do that again, sure.
Yeah, from watching your videos, that area of the trek was absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see the rest of them. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too, what you're doing on social media and YouTube. Was there any point during your journey where you felt so low that you felt like you weren't going to finish the trek?
Well, I have had 2 very low points, but I never thought that I wasn't going to finish it. There's been one time that I was what's the word?
Hypothermic?
Yeah, I was like on the verge of hypothermia.
Okay.
And well, I couldn't do much. I don't remember much either. But Jesper managed to get me warm again. And still, even though I felt so bad, I didn't feel like I wasn't going to finish. And I've been very dehydrated and sick, and still I just wanted to keep on going. Even when we were having our coldest days, I might have been very frustrated and angry, but still never thought that I was going to give up.
That's really fantastic. How about you, Jesper?
I think in the fall, where we were in Sweden in the fall, and the snow, we were kind of racing against the winter. It comes early, it comes in October.
Yeah.
And we had snow already, and we were coming down from the mountains into a small village, and you're really looking forward to get warm and have a nice meal and maybe even a room. But these in fall, in the shoulder season in Sweden, the villages you come into are dead. There's nothing. So you get into the village, but you have no no way of getting any comfort at all. And then it would have been very easy for me to just take a bus back to Denmark, because it started to get a bit hard.
Sure. Was there a point along the track? Was there a point along the track where it switched from being, you're kind of new at this through hiking thing, so you're trying to figure stuff out along the way. Was there a point at which it all just kind of clicked and became really smooth for you, and just the routines started happening, and you just knew what to do?
I think within about 2 weeks, we already had our routine, and like setting up the tent, breaking down and cooking and everything that was already flowing. But for me personally, the hiking itself started to get, I was sort of flying when we were on Kungsleden. That's Sweden's most popular long distance trail. And that's where it got a bit easier for me.
Yeah, a couple of weeks in, 2 or 3 weeks, and we kind of knew from when we wake up in the morning till we go back to bed, we had it.
Yeah.
And also we got to know each other better. I could see when Aïscha wanted a break, but she had a hard time, and she could see when I was struggling, and it helped a lot that we started to see each other's tell signs when we were struggling, and it went a lot easier after that.
I think recognizing each other's humanity in situations like this allows you to cultivate your relationship in a more meaningful way on the trail. It can be incredibly challenging to have this relationship as a couple, and then be thrust into an environment where there's lots of things going on. You have the need to walk a long distance. You have the need to stay warm in a rainstorm. There's a swarm of mosquitoes around your head and all these different things. And I imagine it's an environment for some people that is going to cultivate and create conflict. So being able to manage that is a skill that I imagine you learn quickly, or you would not have been able to hike 3,000 kilometers together. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but also, of course, we would get mad at each other at some points, but
we can also get over it very quickly.
Yeah, being
Right.
in those conditions also, you put it in the background very fast, and then you go at it again. So
The wilderness is a very difficult place to maintain a grudge for any length of time. So where are you guys right now?
We are just outside of Vienna in Austria.
And what are you getting ready to do?
We actually just started today on our next through hike.
And so you started in Vienna and you are planning to go where?
We're planning to go to Nice in France.
Okay. And how many kilometers will you be walking?
Approximately 1,500 kilometers.
So are you taking primarily the routes along the Alps?
Yes, but there are many. So
Yes.
we're gonna take it as we go, kind of. There are many popular and big ones, and it's very organized as well. So we're just gonna see what the terrain is like, the weather conditions, and how we feel, what we want to see, and like I said, take it as we go.
So this is kind of your full-time gig, and I want to talk about this a little bit. Your handles on social media and whatnot are Bohohobos. Can you tell me a little bit about that name and how you came up with it and what it means?
Oh, well, Boho stands for us a little bit for the free-spirited, creative traveling lifestyle, and hobos, yeah, like where we land, we will work. So before our Scandinavian through hike, we worked in Finland, and we did work away as well. We do some volunteering, and the same for when we end this trip. We want to find some work in the area. Just to get to know an area better, and so we don't have to fly to a certain place afterwards. Because we also don't own a house or anything. We don't have a place that we actually call home.
And so are you like, you've been in Vienna for a few months, is that right?
No, we during COVID-19 we were stuck in northern Finland, where we were working. We had to get back to see our family after 3 months lockdown.
Yes.
And the initial plan was to start in Denmark again and continue to Nice, but we lost about 4 months of hiking, so we kind of wanted to make it fun for ourselves and just start in the mountains while we could.
Right.
So we just
you were originally going to start at Nessel and hike to Nice, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Denmark was still in a lockdown and I couldn't get in, so we had to change our plan.
Oh wow. Okay. And what is the most interesting temporary job that you guys have had?
I think we were volunteering in northern Finland in a dog sledding farm, run by a French couple living in Mongolian yurts. We did that.
That's cool.
For 3 or 4 months. Yeah. So this was without electricity, without
running water. Without heat.
Yeah, and that was really, really special, and we still we got along very well with that French couple, and we
loved the place. It was 36 dogs. Usually sled dog farms have like over 100 dogs, and we could just really connect with these dogs and create a personal bond with each one of them.
I never knew picking up dog poop would make me so happy.
I can imagine, actually, that it sounds like a wonderful time. It's just simple, uncluttered
Yeah.
living.
It's very hard though to wake up in the morning at minus 10 in your sleeping bag and having to get out and make a fire before you start to work.
Right, right. So tell me, as part of your lifestyle strategy, you are blogging, you're Instagramming, you're creating YouTube videos. Do you have a strategy that you're pursuing? Do you consider yourself influencers or bloggers, or tell me a little bit about that.
Um, we both really like making pictures and to write. And we mainly started just to keep our family and friends up to date. And yeah, apparently more people were interested about it, so they kind of feel obliged to do a little bit more and to post more regularly. But it's not something we think about full time. We just enjoy the process of making videos and pictures.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed seeing the videos that you've made from your Scandinavian hike, and I am looking forward to seeing the rest of them because I want to see the end of the journey.
Thank you. That's nice to hear.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, and tell our readers where they can find you online.
Thank you very much for having us. You can find us on Instagram at the Bohohobos, and on our website, thebohohobos.com, and on Facebook you can search for us also with the Bohohobos.
Aïscha and Jesper, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll let you guys get back to your through hike and on to Nice in France. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
That was a great conversation, Ryan. And, what stuck out to me about that was when they mentioned that they had started out as novice hikers, hiking really quickly and pushing really hard. And then they actually slowed down in the back half of their hike. And that really was interesting to me because I think most people speed up. And what it made me think about was that they knew what they wanted out of that hike. Even as new hikers, they had an understanding of what they were trying to accomplish. They didn't let ego interfere with that. And they understood that if they maintained that speed, they may not be able to finish their hike. So they kind of explored their limits and then found their limits, and they didn't exceed their limits out of some type of type A thing. And I found that very inspirational because I often do the opposite of that, and it ends up getting me hurt.
I agree, and I think it's certainly the opposite of American through hiking, where you start a trail, you get your trail legs behind you, you dial in your gears, you visit towns on the way up, and then you crank up your mileage. And so that by the time you end your multi-month through hike, you might be doing a 30 or 40 mile day. I think partly it's because of you're trying to get north to beat the weather, at least on the PCT and CDT, and to some extent on the AT. But it's also probably cultural, right? So there's a different culture that people experience in a place like Scandinavia. Both of the Bohohobos are Scandinavian, one's from Denmark and one's from the Netherlands. And then you've got this American culture, which is bigger, faster, better, right? And so maybe there's a cultural thing there as well. But the idea of backing off and just enjoying the experience, I think there's a lot to learn from that.
What stuck out to you about the interview?
That a relatively inexperienced hiker can walk out the door and tackle what is an absolutely incredible adventure like this and learn the process along the way. I mean, these guys are not experienced through hikers. They had to kind of figure it out as they went. And the the thing from the conversation that really stuck out to me when I asked Jesper, how long did it take before you really felt like you got into a routine? And he said 2 weeks. And I thought, that's awesome, right? So you go from virtually zero experience to 2 weeks later being quite comfortable with what you're doing for the next few months. And that's really cool to me.
It reminds me of something that people sometimes say on trails, which is it's just walking. Anyone can do it. And
Right.
while that's somewhat of an exaggeration, certainly not always true across the board, it's a mindset that I think speaks to the inherent simplicity of the sport. And that's what I love about this sport is that
Right.
at its simplest, it doesn't require you to go out and drop thousands of dollars on gear if you don't want to. You can boil it down to its essentials and go out and have a blast. And I love that about it.
Yep, me too.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Backpacking Light podcast. But before we sign off today, we have a message from one of our longtime members.
Hey guys, my name is Kendall Clement, and I've been a Backpacking Light member since 2008. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Backpacking Light podcast, and I just wanted to say that we really want to keep this podcast free of advertising, which means that it's going to be supported by BackpackingLight.com membership fees. A BackpackingLight.com membership gives you access to 20 years of archives, forums, and online courses. So please consider supporting this podcast and become a member right now at backpackinglight.com/subscribe. Thanks for listening, everybody.
You can download the show notes for this episode at backpackinglight.com/podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review. It helps other people find the show.
Thanks for listening to the Backpacking Light podcast. I'm Andrew Marshall.
And I'm Ryan Jordan. If we can leave you with one parting message, it's this: pack less, be more, because lighter is better. Happy trails, everybody.
So I shoulder my backpack, walk away from the